This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico 5 years ago this week. Now the island is again dealing with the impact of another hurricane. Fiona made landfall on Sunday, and days later, hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses on the island remain without power, reports NPR. The government's emergency portal system, as of this morning, says another 359,000 do not have access to clean water. Coming up Where We Live, we talk to Puerto Ricans living in Connecticut about how they're working to help. The island's ties to our state have been strong since post-World War II, but after Maria, more Puerto Ricans moved here and stayed. As of 2019, more than 8% of residents are Puerto Rican, according to the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College. Are you one of them? Or do you still have family on the island? We want to hear from you. Join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Now, Stanford-based AmeriCares has worked in Puerto Rico since 2016. The Disaster Relief and Global Health Organization launched a response to Hurricane Fiona on Monday and has a team in San Juan. Joining us now with more on the phone with us from San Juan, Dr. Brenda Rivera Garcia, who's Senior Director of Latin America and Caribbean Programs for AmeriCares. Brenda, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Lucy. Buenos dias.
Thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, AmeriCares has had a long presence in Puerto Rico. What are you seeing right now, and what are your top priorities from the team that you have there?
Lucy, what we're seeing right now is that over 63% of the population of households still are without power. Over 25% of households are without potable water. So 5 days after the storm, we are still in the dark and struggling to reach some of the families and communities that have been totally incommunicated because of loss of bridges, of roads, roads just disappearing after intense mudslides. So 88% of the communities that we work with the community health centers, they're still working on generator power out of, as of last night.
Mm. For those of us on the mainland here watching this again, as Puerto Rico is devastated by another natural disaster, when we think about, all of the efforts after Maria to help the island recover, how would you characterize, what's been done there to help with infrastructure, with electricity, with clean water infrastructure, that we're back here again at this point with so many without?
No, it certainly, and the recovery efforts 5 years after Maria have been intense. Some aspects more than others, and again, we have to take into consideration that the infrastructure itself, many years had been kind of a little bit neglected, for many years, and then Maria hit, and it certainly created even more problems. So it's we understand it's going to take a while for Puerto Rico to be to feel that they have fully recovered that infrastructure, and certainly Fiona has put a wrench into all those plans. As far as the communities that we work with, the Puerto Rican people are resilient, but there is so much that they can take. It's not only Maria, it was the earthquakes, it's been COVID, it's been political instability, it's been financial instability, and just days after Fiona, heat waves. So it certainly is challenging, but people here are resilient, and we just have to make sure that they have the tools to continue striving towards their well-being.
Mm. Everything that you just said, it references something that you shared in a statement, that there are painful memories among so many in Puerto Rico. There's stress and trauma that your team also has to meet at this moment. How do you do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, the team here, it's 14 strong. All the staff here in Puerto Rico, they have been born and raised in the island. They're fully committed. They're preparedness experts, right? So they have their own contingency plans and make sure that their families have their contingency plans so that they can dedicate themselves to serving others. And nearly half of that staff here in Puerto Rico, they're actual mental health and psychosocial support experts. They're counselors, social workers, psychiatrists. And they have been instrumental in the recovery efforts in the island as they have continued to do outreach to mental health workers, first responders, to give them the tools for self-care, for well-being, how to not only take care of themselves, but also take care of the communities they serve.
Puerto Rico, again, is a U.S. territory. I had mentioned that AmeriCares is a disaster relief and global health organization. When there are other disasters, international aid comes through from many places. Because of Puerto Rico's status, can you talk a little bit more about, the resources that are available to help Puerto Rico because of its status as a territory?
All right. FEMA is on the ground, and actually they have offices here as well, permanent offices. So we have those resources, and then we have to thank the diaspora. Although there's actually more Puerto Ricans or people of Puerto Rican descent stateside that they're actually living right now in the island. So that diaspora is essential and has proven essential for Puerto Rico's recovery, not only in material things, but also the connection, right? The connection to family and friends. We know that after Maria and during the past 5 years, many people left the island. They left. They moved stateside. So that breaking up of families, that breaking up of your immediate support structure and nucleus has had an effect on the mental health and well-being of the population. But having that connection, right, to the mainland and to the people stateside has proven essential for the recovery.
And one last question for you, Brenda. When we think about, again, the team and all the money that AmeriCares has invested to help after Maria and now Fiona, when we think about the damage done to health centers, talk us through some of that emergency funding there.
Mm-hmm. No, and that has been essential as well. Very important. We have been working with community health centers, basically the federally qualified health clinics, and because they serve the most underserved, the more difficult to reach and rural communities around the island. And we have been supporting with not only access to medicine, making sure that the underinsured or the uninsured can access their insulin, their heart medication, their asthma medication, and supporting the clinics in their infrastructure, making sure that their preparedness plans are in place, that they're well socialized, that everybody understands their role, and giving them tools during COVID so that they could safely take care of the population while taking care of themselves with sufficient protective personal equipment, trainings, capacity building, tools to deal with vaccine hesitancy, COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy. I mean, a number of tools that have gone to support these clinics so that they can better serve.
And I should have asked you, because when we're thinking about this hurricane, it did not just impact Puerto Rico, but also the Dominican Republic as well. Can you tell us briefly AmeriCare's role there, Brenda?
Yes, in Dominican Republic, we do not have an office, an anchor office like we have in Puerto Rico, but we do have strong partners, and we have been since days before the true path of the hurricane could be understood. We have been connecting with those partners, letting them know, are there any particular needs now? And just rest assured that we will be here once the storm is over, and we're ready to hear what are your needs. So right now, the what we have been asked is for hygiene kits for the population, some funding to support fuel and diesel for generators, and connecting to other NGOs that can support with other essential supplies that we don't cover, such as food and clothing.
Again, that's Dr. Brenda Rivera Garcia joining us from San Juan. She's AmeriCare's Senior Director of Latin America and Caribbean Programs. Brenda, thank you for your time and good luck to your team there.
Thank you, Lucy.
You're listening to Where We Live on Connecticut Public. Again, if you have connections to Puerto Rico, do you still have family there? We'd like to hear from you, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. We know that there are many Puerto Ricans in our state that are watching the island closely and also working to find ways to help. Joining us now on the phone is Sammy Vega, president of CICD, the Puerto Rican Parade in Hartford, and a member of the Coalition of Connecticut Puerto Rican Parades and Festivals Relief Committee. Sammy's joining us on the phone. Sammy, welcome.
Good morning. Buenos dias.
And tell us, first off, do you have family and friends on the island? How are they doing?
Yes, I have family in the west of the island, Ciales, Puerto Rico, and also in Caguas. They're doing fine. Unfortunately, right now they don't have water nor light. But something that we have as Puerto Ricans, doesn't matter how many times they fall, they get up 200 times, So they're surviving, but they need help.
Mm. And what are you hearing from them in terms of the response they're getting on the ground there from the government, Sammy?
Again, this is outgoing. As you know, 5 years ago, Hurricane Maria hit the entire island pretty bad. Not only that, 2 years ago, the earthquake that damaged basically the south of Puerto Rico, and then the pandemic. Unfortunately, they don't get no break. I'm just praying that the governor in Puerto Rico and the government will help out. But we here, the people in the States, we got together, and that's what we're supposed to do, help out our island, our family, and our people in the island.
You mentioned that earthquake. I understand that you and the local organization here helped lead a response of how to help Puerto Ricans. That was in January of 2020. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, 2 years ago, we created a website called CT Health Puerto Rico, PR. We had a group of from the States that went over to Puerto Rico to the south and help out the people on the earthquake. And that was right before 2 days when the pandemic started. So right when we were returning to the States, the pandemic happened. So another terrible situation that happened in Puerto Rico.
So now that Fiona has hit the island, and as we mentioned, still people, hundreds of thousands without clean water, without electricity. From Connecticut, what are you doing through the work of the Puerto Rican Parade in Hartford, as well as this coalition of Puerto Rican Parades and Festivals Relief Committee, Sammy?
Yeah, so we launched, again, cthealthpr.org. To collect money, to raise money for the people in need in Puerto Rico. We have been in contact directly with the governor of the Lions Club of Puerto Rico, of the South End of Puerto Rico, Jose Valentin. I just had a brief meeting with him a few minutes ago before going on the air. And unfortunately, they're still out of light and water. And when we got together, we created this relief effort. It's a partnership with all the parades and festival organizers in Connecticut, Hartford, Meriden, New Haven, Bridgeport, Norwich, and Waterbury. And we learned a lot from 5 years ago when we tried to put together a relief effort. In the community, in the States, especially in the States, they all came together. We started collecting water, food, clothing for the island. And we had a great response from the community. The only problem is that we collected so much that we didn't have the resource how to send it. So we learned a lot from 5 years ago. So this time around, we thought the best way is to collect money, get funds, connect, have a trustee contact in Puerto Rico, as we work closely with is the Lions Club of Puerto Rico, Jose Valentin. They are the people that are in ground now and telling us who the people in need, what's the urgency, And again, we not collecting money to rebuild Puerto Rico. We want to help people in need now, like with food, water, just like Dr. Brenda Rivera Garcia mentioned. What they need is right now resources, money for just to feed the people at the moment.
Sammy, thank you for that. And we also have information on our website, ctpublic.org/wherewelive, linking to this organization, as well as the link to help donate towards these efforts. We know that 8% of our residents in our state are Puerto Ricans. We know Connecticut welcomed thousands displaced in the wake of Hurricane Maria 5 years ago, particularly in Hartford and New Haven. And this week, New Haven Mayor Justin Elicker tells Where We Live, quote, "We've had discussions across city departments and with several of our nonprofit and community partners so that we are prepared as a community to support those in need, whether that's family looking for emergency housing, individuals in need of health care, children entering our public schools, and other services and supports." Also, Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin's office tells us the city is ready to partner with community and Hartford groups to help families who may come here, but also said it's not yet clear that we will see anything like the large-scale relocations that we saw 5 years ago after Hurricane Maria. Sammy, did you want to respond to what we heard from these city officials and again, their readiness to help, but also not expecting as many to leave the island as after we saw with Hurricane Maria?
Yes, I guess we have to see and wait. I can see people already coming in. We have already received a few calls of family, especially with kids, because their urgency is basically they want the kids to get back to schools. And I know 5 years ago, Craig Schools out of Alvarado, the one that ran the relief effort 5 years ago, they had a wonderful program. I mean, they took on hundreds of family, and I just hope that doesn't get to that point. I believe in the island. I believe of the people in Puerto Rico. We just have to rebuild, help. But I'm pretty sure that Connecticut and the Puerto Rican people in Hartford will accept and be ready for any situation.
Again, that's Sammy Vega, president of CICD Puerto Rican Parade in Hartford and a member of the Coalition of Connecticut Puerto Rican Parades and Festivals Relief Committee. That website, cthelpspr.org, to donate. Sammy, thank you for your time today.
No, thank you for reaching out and allowing us to express ourselves and finding help for our people in the island.
We also reached out to the Hartford Hispanic Health Council and Junta for Progressive Action in New Haven, who also told us they've been readying internal relief responses. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about lessons learned after Hurricane Maria, including more on efforts to help those displaced. Do you have family in Puerto Rico? You can join us too, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up next week, on Tuesday, we sit down with 5th District Congresswoman Jahana Hayes, who's running for re-election against Republican George Logan. Now, do you live in the 5th District? What questions do you have for Representative Hayes? We hope that you join us on air and online. That's Tuesday, Where We Live. Now, researchers say an estimated 13,000 people came to Connecticut from Puerto Rico in the year after Hurricane Maria in 2017. UConn's Dr. Charles Venator Santiago was one of the researchers commissioned by the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving to look into the data of those displaced. He'll join us in a few minutes. Joining us first on Zoom, Aura Alvarado, Director of Communications and Community Relations for the Capital Region Education Council, or CREC. Aura, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we heard Sammy Vega give you a shout out for the work that you did after so many came to Connecticut after Maria. Again, CREC, I believe, helped co-lead the first relief center in the city, pooling agencies in a one-stop center to welcome those who were displaced. Can you tell us about that time and how you did it?
Yes, first I want to say hi to my friend Sammy and everybody who was on. This was 5 years ago. This was definitely a collective effort. My name is thrown out there all the time, but I could not have done this without the support of the executive leadership team here at CREC and all the agencies that supported us at that time. So yeah, it was 5 years ago. The CREC leadership team was in a group. We were doing a day of caring, and we heard about the hurricane, and of course that we have many Hispanics from Puerto Rico here in our workforce, and some of us were in that leadership room, and we couldn't even focus on what was in front of us, and we just started talking about what we could do. And then in the next few weeks after that, we heard that there was an influx of people coming. We started hearing and that they were just showing up at the airport. They didn't know where to go. And at that moment in time, CREC had a building. It was empty. The lease was paid for a few months, and we decided to have a meeting. We invited over 70 community agencies to a meeting and just said, hey, this is available. We had the meeting right in the building, and we said, we're here, but we can't do this alone. And so a few weeks went on, and we ended up with about 4 or 5. I think we started with 4, and then we added a couple more. So we ended up with about 6 or 7 agencies who were on site with us providing services.
That welcome center definitely needed at that time, and I believe it's now closed. So we know now with Fiona, Sammy just said that they're hearing about some families who want to come here. They don't want their kids to be missing school while so much of the island is still without power and clean water. Yeah. And so can you talk through what you're hearing from the local Puerto Rican community about ways you can help?
Well, I think the biggest question is, is there a space like the relief center that we had 5 years ago? And unfortunately, here on CREC side, we're here to support. As a matter of fact, we're gathering our internal employees, and we're doing a fundraiser where the funds are going to go to AmeriCares through our CREC Cares employee benevolence program. So we're doing that internally, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come as things unfold. In terms of having a physical location, again, that was a moment in time. Right now, we don't have anything physically like that. However, if someone has something like that and they want to reach out to CREC, I know that our executive leadership team is ready to provide insight, support, and maybe guidance as to the lessons learned from 5 years ago. I know I would be happy to assist any way I can. And so right now, what we're hearing is, I'm hearing pockets. There's some people who are just coming to stay with family for a little while. Again, our people are resilient. And I'm talking about, the Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, the people in the Turks and Caicos that are experiencing. And right now, what I'm hearing is neighbors helping neighbors. And because, obviously, I think there's a mistrust with the government over there. And so we all want to make sure that our dollars go to the right place, just like Sammy said. We want to work with community leaders that we know are on the ground, doing the work.
You're hearing Aura Alvarado, who is Director of Communications and Community Relations for the Capital Region Education Council, also known as CREC, as we talk about this latest hurricane to hit Puerto Rico. Do you have family on the island? We want to hear from you, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. On the phone with us, Dr. Charles Venator Santiago, Associate Professor and Faculty Director of the Puerto Rican Studies Initiative at the University of Connecticut. Charles, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to hear from you. I hate under these circumstances.
Yes. Charles, we know you've done research on the post-Maria displacement of Puerto Rican and U.S. Virgin Islanders in Greater Hartford. And we were just talking with Aura about how successful these one-stop centers can be. But we're in this time where not only the fact that this hurricane has hit again, another hurricane on the island, but this climate crisis that these islands are experiencing, this is something that we're going to have to revisit time and time again. I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
So right now, specifically in the case of Fiona, what we're seeing is that it wasn't the winds weren't that strong. What created most damage was the saturation of water. There were more than 30 inches dumped, and the island just couldn't retain the water, and the pumps weren't working. So there was an infrastructure failure in place. But we're also hearing that Hermione is on its way down, and that we expect more rains. So we know that we're going to have a lot of climate events that are going to challenge the infrastructures in the islands. There is plenty of money to fix the infrastructures in Puerto Rico, but the government in Puerto Rico has not taken the initiative to address these issues, even though they have a ton of money available to do that. On a broader scale, what we're seeing with climate change is, and this is an island problem around the world, is that for every inch that the oceans rise, you start getting a level of salination. So we might have another climate displacement happening soon because of lack of drinking water in many islands.
Right.
But this is something that we can expect. And then the key point is that a lot of migrants travel to cities or towns where they have relatives or friends. That's a trend across the world. So we should expect more climate migration in the future.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says small islands like those in the Caribbean are among the most vulnerable to the effects of global warming and sea level rise. And what you just said, Charles, putting water, food security, and infrastructure durability all at high risk.
Yes. And in the case of Puerto Rico, it's really sad because as a U.S. General Accounting report released last Wednesday documents, there are billions of dollars to address these kinds of issues. Yet the inability of the Puerto Rican government to assume responsibility to fix these problems. I mean, for infrastructure, electricity alone, they have $22 billion allocated, and they've only spent less than $1 billion addressing questions of the energy crisis. So part of it is also we need good governments in the islands, and particularly in places like Puerto Rico.
So give us more context there, Charles. You've been on the show many times talking about Puerto Rico, about the corruption that led, the mismanagement of finances that led to this Congress-appointed Fiscal Control Board. And so now with this current government in place, talk more about the challenges that you still see there.
Yeah, so part of it is that there's this general narrative of a super solution through statehood without addressing the infrastructure problems in the islands, without addressing the economic development in the island. So a lot of politicians are promoting this idea of privatization as a way to manage federal funds, but without achieving sort of reforms, necessary reforms to address crises, not just climate crisis. We had an earthquake situation a couple of years ago that displaced a lot of people. And there seems to be an effort to essentially profit from the distribution or management of public funds in the island, which doesn't make any sense, because if you want to promote statehood, you want to build the island's economy so that it's a better place for to be admitted into the United States, or has a stronger economy. But we're at an impasse. The other issue that I want to emphasize is that we also have a different administration at a federal level. Part of the crisis of Maria was that you had a Republican administration that did not believe in using government agencies to provide support. In the case of Democrats, Biden's already declared a major disaster and is willing to put resources to address the issues affecting Puerto Ricans. So we're also in a different place in terms of a national administration dealing with crisis.
Laura, did you want to respond to what Charles has shared with us? Oh, maybe Aurora can't hear us right now. But Charles, I wanted to go back to you because we were talking about the displaced. I believe, 13,000 at the time estimated to have come to Connecticut after Hurricane Maria. We know Junta for Progressive Action in New Haven also helped about 2,000 displaced people from Puerto Rico who resettled here after both Maria and Irma. There was a column by Brookney Pizarro with their executive director, Junta, with the Connecticut Mirror saying that, 5 years after Hurricane Maria, Connecticut resettlement services, quote, are still under-resourced. And she wrote that Junta, again, an important community organization in New Haven, as we know, facing, quote, an uncertain and inadequate funding, imperiling their capacity to respond to future climate-related disasters. What do you think about that, Charles?
So three things I think it's really interesting to highlight. First, Connecticut is a receiving and pass-through state. So there are a lot of families here that were willing to receive Puerto Ricans. And again, Connecticut is the state with the sixth largest Puerto Rican population in the United States. So there's a lot of people that came temporarily and returned to Puerto Rico. After all is said and done, I just looked at the recent numbers. Connecticut gained around 4,000 Puerto Rican new residents in the state during that period of 2017 or in 2018. In terms of the settlements or welcome centers or resource centers, what we found in doing multiple studies throughout the United States was that if you have one fixed location where people can get access to Social Security, health services, mental health, education, food, you name it, a representative from that particular area, those places enable people to integrate into the community in a much simpler and easier way. But these places have to be open for the duration of that. And these places can be open for an emergency situation, and in a non-emergency situation, sort of reduced in services. But they have to be continuously open. And it has to be one or two fixed locations where people know where to go. We do know that in this particular crisis, Fiona, we're not expecting the same migration that we saw in Maria because services are starting to function. Again, schools are opening, electricity is being resumed, water is a problem. But we do know that we expect two more events coming, going to Puerto Rico, which may result in a lot more people wanting to leave, and they'll come to places like Connecticut or other states where they have relatives and family.
Again, you can join us, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Charles, I believe you still have family in Puerto Rico. What are they telling you?
You know, I have mixed responses. My aunts and uncles prepared for this. They had whole house generators, and they lit up the barbecue, and they called their friends, and they watched the baseball game and had a good time. While the hurricane in the southern part of the island, and they haven't had any problems with energy. My mother, on the other hand, hasn't had electricity or water for now going on a week, and she's been struggling left to right. I keep telling her to come with me. She wants to be supportive of people in Puerto Rico. So you have mixed experiences, and that's happening throughout the island. There are people who are really suffering without any water, electricity, or their homes have been washed away, and there are people who have been able to adapt based on Maria.
Again, with us on the phone right now is Dr. Charles Venator Santiago, Associate Professor, also Faculty Director of the Puerto Rican Studies Initiative at the University of Connecticut. Also with us, Aura Alvarado, who's Director of Communications and Community Relations for the Capital Region Education Council, or CREC. She's with us on Zoom. Aura, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. I wanted you to respond a little to what, Charles has shared in terms of, again, helping those that are displaced, because this climate crisis is not going to go away anytime soon. And when we think about the connections to our state with so many Puerto Ricans that have been here for, several decades, the displaced will keep coming when we see these natural disasters. And I wonder if you can talk about the resources that we have here locally to help them.
Well, obviously, the Greater Hartford area has an array of agencies that can help. We have 211, United Way, CRT, Community Health Resources. It's no secret that I wish we could have kept our relief center open. As Charles stated, that the data shows, having a one-stop shop does help. I get flashbacks of how, the people from the island were coming in the middle of winter with, flip-flops and no coats, and they were being asked to, navigate their way around Hartford to find places. And it boggled my mind that, we don't have a steady one-stop shop for everything. So I agree with Charles with what he said, that we should have that. But if we see the influx of people coming, yes, there's resources here. I think what we need to figure out and make easy for folks is how to access the resources and who the contact people are, and not just give a phone number that gets you to press button 1, press button 2, and then we'll call you back. Because that was very frustrating. I remember being on the phone with some families and the case managers at the relief center. We would be on the phone for 45 minutes waiting to get a live person for anything, and just to be told that we had to go somewhere else. So I hope that the lessons learned from 5 years ago have improved. I think we have to accommodate our operation times when things like this happen. I remember, places closed at 4 and we were getting people jobs and they were working nights, and it was just a navigating of the processes. So to answer your question, there are a lot of resources here, and there are a lot of great people doing great work. But a little bit more collaboration and communication would be great. And I'm happy to say that if someone has some ideas and wants to put something together, we can all work as a unit. So when the families come here and are looking for assistance, they don't have to figure it all out on their own.
I believe, Laura, you told Fox 61 that while Hurricane Fiona is not as devastating as Maria, it is a reminder there's still a lot of work left to do. So when you think about what Charles shared about the government and infrastructure failures, I'm wondering if you can give us your perspective on what you want to see on the island to help the people that are still there.
Well, it just saddens me that the infrastructure is still an issue, that we're still talking about it, because if you I heard, and don't quote me on this, but like Dominican Republic, right? They got hit hard, but they got their power on I think the next day, right? So I don't understand why Puerto Rico, an island that, we're United States citizens, that we're still having these issues 5 years after. And that people are still struggling with trusting their government. Obviously, you're never going to trust government 100%, but to be in this situation still, that I have family who say, no, just, we'll get gift cards and give them to people. Don't send cash because it's getting stolen. I mean, it's things like that just breaks my heart. But I think, we can't, I hope we're not here another 5 years later talking about this again. I think the infrastructure needs to be addressed. And I hope that maybe Biden's office can come and say, listen, we have to do this and make people accountable. And it's just sad because things have improved, but not to the level where it needs to be.
Charles, earlier we asked AmeriCare's senior director there about not only helping with some of the daily needs, water and shelter, to make sure that they have access to power, but also the toll that it takes on people who are dealing with one natural disaster after another and after another. And when you talk about not having faith in the government that's there to even deal with the infrastructure needs, how are they dealing with the mental health needs of the people of Puerto Rico?
Well, can I offer one comment to ours, and then
Sure.
I'll respond to that one. So one of the things that we learned in multiple studies is that in the absence of a government or in the absence of a continuous working center, families assume responsibility over people. So one of the things that we saw in Connecticut was that the majority of families who were living in poverty were assuming the responsibility to help friends and family, house them, take care of them. And I want to highlight this because Puerto Ricans have a triple rate of poverty compared to the average resident in Connecticut. In other words, there's 29% of poverty among Puerto Ricans in Connecticut, as opposed to 7% for the general population. And the median income for Puerto Ricans is around $44,000 a year, as opposed to $83,000 for the average resident. So we have to be mindful that this is not just a toll on people who are traveling, but also a toll on people who are willing to sacrifice their livelihoods to help friends and relatives with little resources. On the question of mental health, to return to that point, one of the problems that we're seeing in Puerto Rico particularly is that there's been an exodus of public health officials and doctors, professionals who can address these kinds of issues. I happen to have a relationship with a community-based program in Ponce, in the southern part of the island, My mother trains community organizers, and they lost their homes. So even the community health workers that could help and address issues of mental health may not be physically able to provide those services because they lost their homes or their livelihoods.
Mm. Again, you're hearing Dr. Charles Venator Santiago, Associate Professor and Faculty Director of the Puerto Rican Studies Initiative at the University of Connecticut. Charles, I understand that you are heading up a huge research project to create a profile of Puerto Ricans in Connecticut. I mentioned earlier that Puerto Ricans started coming here, I believe, post-World War II. We've got many connections to the state for decades now. Can you tell us where that stands?
So, yes, two things. In Puerto Ricans actually were here since 1898, and Spaniards who were born in Puerto Rico were already doing commerce in the coastal regions. So we have a long tradition of being present. We received funding from the General Assembly to create an initiative that can provide documentation, to provide data on Puerto Ricans. We're going to do an oral histories project. We're going to do an archival system to provide public resources, public archives of documents. And then we're going to provide support to different organizations in research capacity. So we're starting to build it, and hopefully we'll start releasing reports. I had hoped to have a couple this week out, but been a little distracted with the meetings. But we're hoping to start producing reports that can inform public debates around Puerto Rico with data. And then we're also going to work with groups to do research to answer questions that the data can't answer.
Laura, still with us. When we think about CREC being one of these important organizations, working with partners to help families, even after Maria, and now we've got Fiona, you're helping raise funds. Can you tell us where that stands, Laura?
Yes. So internally, I love my CREC colleagues. We're rallying and implementing our CREC Cares, which is our employee benevolence program. We just sent out an email asking employees to donate. And like we did 5 years ago, where the money raised is going to AmeriCares, because we know AmeriCares is not just in Puerto Rico, but they can help Dominican Republic and Turks and Caicos, just in the Caribbean. And so our funds are going to be allocated to AmeriCares directly. Mm-hmm.
Charles, as we think about this recovery now from Fiona, what are you going to be watching for in the next few weeks? Again, if we look at the government's emergency portal system online, they're trying to update in terms of who has access to clean water, what the power situation looks like. But are you skeptical of those numbers when we think about the people impacted in different communities around the island?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a big problem because it's a difficult situation to assess when you're getting misinformation. To give you a simple example, yesterday the Puerto Rican Power Authority was reporting that about half the island had electricity, while LUMA, the distributor of energy, was reporting that only a third of the island had electricity. They have mixed messages coming from government agencies and misrepresentations of information. For example, yes, water has been turned on in lots of parts of the island, but that water is not necessarily drinkable water because the power processing plants aren't working at full capacity in many places. So yes, part of what I'm looking for is to figure out how that misinformation can help us understand what the impact in migration is going to be. But my biggest concern is that Fiona is just the beginning of what we expect to be a series of hurricanes and other climate events. And I'm more concerned with the inability to catch up or to prepare the island for those other events. I mean, we're expecting another deluge of rain this weekend. And that's what I think is going to trigger some migration, whether it be temporary or more permanent. We might see some migration here to Connecticut, and we want to be ready to support.
Laura Alvarado, do you have final thoughts for us with your work in the community?
Well, the thoughts, that we're here, our people are resilient on the island and here in Connecticut, in the greater Hartford area too. I know a lot of us are frustrated to be here again and saddened, and our prayers are with each and every one of us, especially in our island and in the Dominican Republic as well.
Again, you're hearing Aura Alvarado, who's the Director of Communications and Community Relations at CREC Education. We have links on our website, ctpublic.org/where we live, to connect with these organizations that are collecting donations to help people in Puerto Rico. Aura, thank you so much for your time and the work that you've been doing.
Thank you so much.
Also with us, Dr. Charles Venator Santiago, Faculty Director of Puerto Rican Studies Initiative at the University of Connecticut. Charles, always a pleasure to hear from you about the research you're doing and the perspective you bring. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for your work.
I'm Lucy Nalpathanchil. Today's show produced by Katie Pellico. Our technical director is Kat Pastor. Special thanks today to Eugene Amatruda. Again, coming up next Tuesday, we're going to have 5th District Congresswoman Jahana Hayes here, who's running for re-election against Republican George Logan. We want to hear your questions for her. We hope you join us on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.